Night leans over the old Oregon Valley the way a quilt falls over a resting child. The pines creak with quiet gossip, their needles catching silver as the moon glides between small, wandering clouds. At the edge of a gravel road that has forgotten half of its stones, a neon sign hums. It is the size of an old dream, and it says what it has always said: Mystery Shack. A letter flickers, then holds, as if even electricity is a little sleepy out here. A moth loops and loops, undecided between light and shadow, and the forest takes a slow breath. It is safe to close your eyes. It is safe to listen. The world, even the strange parts, even the parts that make you whisper, "Did that really happen?" softens at night. Far off, something hoots, then thinks better of it, and quiets. Far off again, a trickle of water moves through stones it has known longer than names. The valley remembers. The town remembers. The house remembers too. Floorboards that once laughed under running feet are sensible now. Chairs sit with their backs together like old friends. A curtain leans in to see if the night still has stars. It does. We are going to tell a story. Not the loud version. Not the version that clangs and flashes and runs. We will tell the gentler version. The bedtime version. The version that sits on the porch steps with a warm mug and lets the steam find the air. There are secrets here and riddles and notes written in the margins of worn-out journals. There are things that don't line up until suddenly, gently they do. There are faces that look like yours, and choices that could have been yours, and roads that split in two. The lantern is lit. The door is open. The chair is waiting. In we go. First there is family, because there is always family, whether you know it or not. Threads that tie without asking. Threads that tangle and then find their way back. The Pines family began long before you heard their names, with two boys who did not yet know which way time would lean. One of them carried questions like pebbles in his pocket. One of them carried charm like spare change. Between them, a coin they flipped again and again, not to choose heads or tails, but to hear that bright little sound. And in a town tucked into a fold of the world where maps misplaced their rulers, a door would open, and a sign would hum, and a summer would start. But do not rush. The night is patient. The story will wait while you get comfortable. Breathe in. The room smells like old wood and soft paper and a little pine resin, the kind that rubs onto your fingertips if you touch a low branch. Breathe out. Let your shoulders drop. The hills outside settle, the forest settles, even the moth settles for a moment on the warm corner of the window. We will begin where most mysteries really begin. Not with a scream, not with a flash, but with a small human choice. Someone deciding to go and someone else deciding to stay. Someone deciding to believe and someone deciding to pretend that they do not. The town of Gravity Falls does not look special when you first crest the ridge. It looks like a postcard that came late in the mail and picked up a little rain on the way. But the air is different. There is a quiet that is not empty, the way a closed book is not empty. The mountains stand off to the side like chaperones, pretending not to watch. The trees promise to keep a secret, if you will. And the ground, it seems, remembers a great deal more than it says. We will walk softly. We will ask politely. The night will answer in its own time. There is a rule in places like this. The rule is simple. If you keep your voice low, the story comes closer. If you sit still, the footsteps in the hall turn out to be your heart, knocking gently for your attention. If you hold the light just so, the dust does not scatter. It becomes stars. And so, with slow, easy steps, We open the door to the Pines' legacy, and we keep the light steady, and the house does not mind. Before the journals, before the neon, before the summer that made a shape out of 2 seasons and 100 questions, there were 2 boys standing on the lip of a little New Jersey shore. They were not the same, and they were not strangers. Their shoes filled with sand. The wind put wild thoughts in their hair. You can imagine their voices, the way kids invent the future like a game of pretend that refuses to end at dinner. Stanley was laughter learned from trial and error. If a door didn't open, he tried a window. If the window stuck, he told a story so good that the house leaned forward to listen and forgot to be locked. He collected friends the way peers collect pennies. He liked things that shone, and he liked making things shine. He was loyal in a way that could sometimes trample flowers without meaning to, because loyalty runs first, thinks second, and apologizes with both hands. At night he would lie awake and listen to waves and wonder how to make them his. A boat, maybe. A big boat with a name that sounded like a promise. Stanford was the quieter kind of bright, a steady candle rather than the sparkler. His notebook started early, margins filled with little arrows that said, "Look here and see this, and why not this other thing?" He wanted to know the rules, not to obey them without question, but to press on them and watch them bend. He built small things that did what large things could not. He saw patterns where other people saw wallpaper. At night he would lie awake and listen to waves and try to count them, then stop counting and listen again. He wondered what the tide wanted and whether the moon negotiated. They were twins, which is not a trick and not an explanation, but it is a way of being. 2 people who learn to read from each other's faces the way other people learn to read clocks. 2 people who split tasks without saying so because one hand already knows what the other wants. One day that felt ordinary and therefore important, they made a promise. They would help each other. They would build something. They would get out. They did not know yet that getting out and coming home can be the same direction, turned twice. The world arrived with its little tests. School is a pocket universe that magnifies a few truths and hides the rest. Stanford answered questions before the chalk dust settled, and teachers liked him in the way teachers like a student who makes them remember why they began. Stanley won the room the moment he opened his mouth, and rooms liked to be won. When they needed money, they invented jobs. When the jobs ran out, they invented more. They shared a coin between them, real and metaphorical, a token for futures. Sometimes it landed in the sand and they dug it out laughing, future and present tangled in their fingers. Time has a way of asking for exact change. A plan that begins with 2 boys often arrives at a door with only 1 knob. We do not need to tell the loud version of the argument that opened a space between them. The night does not need the echo. It is enough to say that for a while they believed different things about the same world. One believed in the ladder, the other in the window. One believed in building high, the other in getting inside the room where the blueprints waited. It hurt. That is the important part, because only things that matter can bruise. Years passed in the ordinary ways, the kind of years that look like transit maps afterward, with colored lines crossing at stations you barely remember choosing. Stanley learned to keep moving because if you keep moving, disappointment pants a little trying to catch up. He learned to talk to people who wanted to say no and find the word that turned the hinge. He learned that charm is a light you can't hold forever, and you need a place to set it. He found a place at the far edge of Oregon where the roads thinned out and the sky remembered how to be large. A building needed a name, and he gave it one. Mystery Shack was not only a joke and not only a business. It was a campfire that pretended to be a cash register. If you stood close enough, It told stories in the heat. Stanford took a different line on the map. He discovered that questions breed like rabbits. He discovered that some doors open toward you and some away, and you pull when you should push, and you learn. He discovered that the world collects oddities in its pockets, and that if you turn a pocket inside out, the buttons fall with the lint. He followed threads that led off the page. He found gravity falls because a certain kind of compass wanted to point there, even when the north said otherwise. He took notes until the notes began to take him. Family continued because it does. A new generation walked in. Dipper and Mabel arrived like summer often does, with a trunk full of clothes that never quite make it back into the trunk. Two kids who loved each other the way you love the person who reminds you who you were a minute ago and who you might be tomorrow. Two kids who did not yet know that you can inherit more than a house or an old photograph. They inherited a town that liked to keep secrets and an uncle who liked to pretend he did not keep any at all. If you listen closely, the floorboards say their names, not because they haunt, but because places remember. Stan, Ford, Dipper, Mabel, the names are threads. When you pull gently, a picture emerges, not all at once, not with a snap. Slowly, like fog lifting from the road. The picture is not a straight line. It is a circle that pretends to be a line until you step back. What is the legacy, then? It is a lesson learned over and over. Curiosity without company is a lonely house. Company without curiosity is a noisy room. Together they are a home that never runs out of questions, and a table that never runs out of chairs. The Pines legacy is a light left on in the hallway. It means that when someone wakes thirsty at 3 a.m, they will not bump into the dark. It means that when the strange arrives, and it will, there is already a place to set it down and look at it together. The neon hums again. Somewhere in the back room, a box that should not move sighs and settles. Somewhere under the porch, small eyes blink and decide the night is friendly enough to stay. And on the mantel, a photograph in a crooked frame catches a line of moonlight and keeps it. Twins, children, summers, a coin still warm from a pocket. The legacy sits there, not loud, not proud, simply present. If you were to ask the house to define the word family, it would not speak. It would open its door. We have time. We have all the time the night is willing to give. We will carry the lantern forward, down the hall of the shack, and into the room where notebooks wait with elastic patience. We will turn a page and meet the ink that made a map. The journals sit as if they have always been there. In a way, they have. Maps tell the truth they are paid to tell. They lay out distances like polite acquaintances, nodding at rivers, shaking hands with highways. Gravity Falls draws a small circle on those maps, the size of a fingernail. A dot that says, there is something here, but refuses to specify. The valley is older than the numbers on its boundary stones. It is older than the first laughter that skipped between two trees, older than the first argument that climbed a hill and sat scowling until dusk. Some places collect stories the way certain sweaters collect lint. Gravity Falls collects stories until they have weight. If you listen, you can hear the low thrum of kept secrets, the way you can hear a refrigerator across the kitchen on a very quiet night. It is easy to mistake the place for ordinary if you arrive at noon. Noon is the hour that makes everybody look like they know what they are doing. People sweep porches. A dog pretends to bark. A weather vane says wind when what it really means is time. But in the blue hours at either end of the day, the valley shows a little of its other face. The fog does not roll. It pours the way tea pours, along channels that were cut by a careful hand. The birds do not sing. They speak in short, clipped phrases like librarians. And the trees do not sway for the wind alone. Sometimes they sway in conversation, nodding to points you cannot quite catch. The town should not exist, people say, because the ground here behaves as if it remembers a different set of instructions. How does a place acquire a reputation like that? Quietly at first. An early settler reports that compasses misbehave at the South Ridge, and nobody is surprised because compasses have always had a little drama in them. A logging crew takes the long way around a stand of trees because the saw teeth dull there for no good reason. A child finds a stone with edges that are too straight to be honest and brings it home. It hums in the night until someone puts a blanket over it. These stories stack like plates. Individually, they are nothing. Together, they tilt the shelf a little. Old papers carry old names. The valley has been called things that do not translate well. Some of those names sound like a sigh and a vowel. Some sound like a joke told by someone who doesn't laugh. The current name is sensible. Gravity, falls, things that go downward, and the place where water does what it always does when it finds an edge. But speak it aloud slowly, and it begins to sound like an instruction. Gravity, falls. As if a rule relaxes its shoulders here. As if the way things are supposed to behave is only a suggestion, scotch taped to the afternoon. There are markers if you know where to look. Stones that refuse moss. Shadows that keep their shape regardless of the branch that casts them. A certain bend in the river where, if you watch long enough, leaves float against the current with a stubbornness that feels personal. Late at night, local radios pick up stations that no one has licensed, voices faint and cheerful, playing songs that have not been written yet, interrupted by advertisements for stores that will never open. The town is polite about all of this. People still wave, people still mow, but even the most practical among them will tell you, if pressed kindly, that sometimes a person's reflection turns its head a fraction after they do. Why does it stand, then? Why does the town carry on if the ground shrugs at gravity and the sky forgets its lines? Because towns are made of people, and people have chores. Bills do not recognize anomalies. Roofs do not fix themselves because the forest is feeling whimsical tonight. The strange lives beside the daily, like a neighbor whose yard decorations you have stopped trying to explain. At the diner, the coffee pours. At the hardware store, nails come in neat cardboard boxes with numbers on the side that do not change when you blink. Children ride their bikes and shout over the wind, their voices wide with the confidence of people who have not yet read the fine print on the world. If you stay, if you let the week settle into you like sand finds the bottom of the jar, you will learn the rhythms. Tuesdays are for certain clouds. Thursdays are for a rumor that walks from the bakery to the barber and gets a haircut before it sits down. Saturday mornings, the farmer's market sets up on the square, and the tomatoes blush as if surprised to be chosen. Someone always sells jars with labels that read simply local, as if that is the flavor. In the evening, a band with a name like the Knotty Pines plays songs that predate their instruments. The youngest dancer always falls asleep on the way home, chin tucked, dream heavy, and is carried in the door like a secret that gladly became ordinary. Listen long enough, and you notice the town's small defenses. Wind chimes hung in odd numbers. Salt spilled not accidentally across certain thresholds. Lanterns kept with fresh oil even when electricity works just fine, thank you. These choices are not superstition. They are manners. The valley appreciates good manners. If you greet it in the right order, it shows you its friendliest face. If you rush, well, you will only miss the thing you hurried for. In a low hill behind a fence that sags like an old belt, a half-buried stone carries a carving that does not match any alphabet that pays taxes. Someone rubs chalk into the grooves once a year and then washes it away with a careful bucket. Children are told it is a memorial. For what exactly depends on the storyteller. A fox trots by with the calm posture of a thing that believes it belongs. It does. The town agrees. Belonging here is less about ancestry and more about how you treat the odd when it knocks at your door and asks for directions. Some nights, a light appears in the sky that is not a star and not a plane and not the kind of lantern that people hold. It moves in a pattern that suggests opinion. People look up, then down, and decide to finish the soup. Because in a town that shouldn't exist, a great many things do, and you cannot be surprised all the time. That would be exhausting. Instead, people become excellent at gratitude. Thank you for the roof. Thank you for the rain. Thank you for the strange thing returning what it borrowed. Dipper once stood on the edge of the forest and tried to map the sounds. He wrote in a notebook because he is that kind of boy. Leaf sheath rasp, beetle click, distant water, wind describing a circle around a trunk. The soft note of something passing through a place it liked. He did not write the last one down. Some experiences draw a line between the ears and the heart and decline to be spelled. Mabel stood beside him and offered a candy that tasted like childhood summers have always tasted, regardless of brand. She looked into the trees and waved as if to a friend just out of sight. It was not a joke. The valley waved back in its way, a little breeze lifting hair, a little light on the ground moving like a shy cat. That was enough map for one evening. Why does the town keep its secrets beyond mischief or shyness? Perhaps because naming a thing is not the same as knowing it. Perhaps because the valley trusts people more when they learn to see without labeling everything. Gravity Falls prefers people who can sit quietly by a river without asking the river to explain itself. People who can hold a question in their mouth the way you hold a smooth pebble in your hand, enjoying the weight without needing to weigh it. The town that shouldn't exist does not apologize. It offers instead what all good places offer: a chair in the shade, a road that leads to your own front door whether you meant for it to or not, and a nighttime full of sounds that declare, in their patient, domestic way, that strangeness belongs as long as it minds the house rules. By the time the moon dips behind the western ridge and the sky lightens into early, nothing has been solved, but everything feels answered. That is how you know you have stayed long enough for one day. We have more to see, but we do not rush. The journals are waiting. They have waited for years. They are good at it. Paper learns patience from the hands that turn it. The Mystery Shack is a building that grew the way certain stories do, by addition instead of plan. A porch that used to be smaller, a back room that used to be a box, a roof that learned to hold snow without complaint. The sign out front loves to brag. The bones inside love to creak. If you stand in the foyer and look up, the rafters make a kind of rib cage, as if the house were a friendly creature that swallowed laughter whole and kept it warm. By day, the shack is a museum of decisions made with a grin. Cabinets hold things that tell lies convincingly, a jackalope that refuses to be embarrassed, a pickle something that would complain about the jar if it could, a rug that suggests an animal history without committing to specifics. Tourists hand over bills and receive in exchange a tall drink of story. Stan, in his uniform of confidence and showman shrug, guides them through and leaves them lighter in the wallet and heavier in the afternoon. He winks because he cannot help it. He smiles because he wants to. The shack winks with him. Every screen door squeak a rim shot, every spotlight a nod. But the shack is also a notebook with doors. Behind the cash register, behind the jokes, behind the angles that make Cabinet A look farther from Cabinet B, than distances allow, the house keeps its private ledger. Floorboards that tilt on purpose in the 2 o'clock corridor. A panel that drops cleanly with an old magician's satisfaction. A ladder that knows your weight and adjusts like a companion. The shack is not haunted in the usual way. It is inhabited by intention. Many hands have made it. Many secrets have moved through it. Some of those secrets are heavy and have learned to sit still. Some are quick and prefer to hang near the vents where the air runs. At night, after the last car is bumped down the drive and the last souvenir has found a pocket that will forget it until laundry day, the shack exhales. It is not relief exactly. It is the way a stage feels when the curtain closes and the lights go to their cool, gentle sleep. In that hour, rooms remember their other purposes. The gift shop becomes briefly a library because objects rest best near their cousins. The storage room becomes an archive because boxes like to gossip. And the office, Stan's office, becomes something like a chapel to persistence because each ledger line is a prayer for one more day working. There is a hidden way down and then another. The shack has layers like an onion that went to school. Dipper found one entrance and then another, drawn by the logic that if a house makes one secret, it is practicing for the second. He learned the careful art of closing a door exactly as it was before, right down to the angle of dust. Mabel learned the kind art of leaving a tiny present for the next person who would find it, a sticker inside a duct, a note that said hello friend in bubble letters. The house approved. It rewards curiosity that carries kindness, and it watches out for boldness that might stub a toe. What shadows does the shack keep? Not the scary kind with teeth. More like the kind you get when you stack memories and the light has to find its way around them. A closet that holds hats from the year money was short, and the shows ran long. A drawer that holds receipts from a day when the register sang. A broken armchair that remembers every story told to lift a bad afternoon. These shadows are honest. They are what happens when a life is lived in one place long enough that the air knows the schedule and the walls lean in to hear the jokes. There are stranger shadows, too. In a far corner behind a shelf that insists you count before you move it, a panel hides a panel hides a panel. Behind the last one, a small room waits, and in the room a table stands, and on the table lies the kind of quiet that comes from work that mattered. Tools arranged in a way that says the hands that used them loved their work. Notes pinned in tidy rows like birds that will fly again in the morning. Here is where research pretended to be carpentry so it could get along with everybody. Here is where fear and hope sat at the same bench and learned to share the pencil. Stan would call all of this overkill, then show you how the latch works, then show you where to put your foot so you don't slip when you come back out. He is the shack steward and its shield, the man who stands between the front door and the weather. He likes his chair, his coffee, his routine that always includes improvisation. He likes the kids more than he says and less than he shows, which is to say exactly enough. The shack likes him. Buildings do not have favorites, not really, but they do prefer hands that understand grain. Stan understands. He stands where he should, shims where he must, and speaks to the house as if it were listening. It is. Suze moves through the rooms with the gentle care of a person who learned very young how to be helpful and never unlearned it. He fixes the things that break and befriends the things that are not sure whether they are broken. He knows which board will pop if you step just so, and has taught it to behave half the time. He keeps a little notebook of solutions that would look like magic if he explained them, which he does not because the point is not to be impressive. The point is to make sure the popcorn machine is ready on Saturday and the back door doesn't stick in the rain. Wendy leans in doorways the way some people lean into the future. She belongs to the shack as you belong to a summer job that accidentally becomes part of your vocabulary. She can carry 3 boxes at once and laugh at a joke that isn't good and somehow make it good. The shack appreciates competence disguised as shrug. It stores those moments in the soft spaces, the ones you do not see unless you spend a lot of time here, the way a house stores sunlight that only shows up in late autumn at 4 in the afternoon. In the attic, the twins claimed a wedge of the world and made it their own. Blankets tossed and then folded. Sweaters rescued from the edge of a bed and then put back on the edge of the bed in case future comfort arrives sooner than expected. On a little dresser, treasures line up like students at the start of gym class. A pine cone that was different in a way no one could explain, and therefore perfect. A ticket stub that still remembers the smell of caramel. A button that might be from a jacket, or might be from a universe where buttons are trophies. When the window is open a few inches, the house breathes with them. The shack holds its laughter for the children. It keeps it in the ductwork and lets it out in soft puffs. When Dipper finds a clue, the vent near the baseboard sighs happily. When Mabel finishes a sweater that no one else could have invented, the light bulb in the bedside lamp decides to last a little longer than it strictly should. Houses cannot say, "I see you," with words. They use drafts and warmth and the sound of a stair that learns your name. There is a bunker, and we will save its sharper edges for another hour. Tonight, you only need to know that beneath jokes and price tags, intention lives. The shack is not simply a stage. It is a workshop for courage. It asks people to look, then look again, then admit that looking closely is a kind of love. Stan's bluster is part of the lesson. He sells you a rubber alligator and makes you complicit in the fun. If you can laugh at a rubber alligator in the sunlight, perhaps you will not panic when something real and impossible shows its face in the moonlight. The shack trains the heart to hold both. In a drawer with a sticky handle, 2 things lie together that tell the truth in their quiet way. A stack of old flyers, cheap paper, ink that smudges if you breathe on it wrong. World's most authentic curious. And beside them, a neatly labeled envelope with a number that once kept the lights on when hope was low. These are shadows, too. Not dangerous, not ashamed, simply the evidence of days survived. The shack does not apologize for surviving. It offers its rooms as proof that you can put together something that works out of pieces that weren't supposed to fit. At midnight, if you stand at the exact center of the main room and turn slowly, you can feel a small tug, like the way a magnet chooses its companions. It is not dangerous. It is a reminder that the shack sits inside a town, that sits inside a valley, that sits inside a set of rules that sometimes choose to bend. The tug points toward a place in the wall where a person once leaned very hard during a very long day and said, "Please." The wall remembers, the shack remembers. It keeps that memory not as a wound, but as a knot in wood, the kind that's beautiful because it is true. When dawn finds the eaves and puts the first thin gold on the shingles, the shack shakes itself like a dog coming out of a lake. Signs straighten. Props remember their lines. The smell of coffee floats from the office and gets into the gift shop the way news gets into a small town. The day begins again. And yet if you were to ask the house what it prefers, day or night, it wouldn't choose. Day pays the bills. Night tells the story. The shack loves both. The way family loves both the person you are in public and the person you are when the day is done and your shoes are by the door. We will turn soon toward the journals. We will move from theater into study. But first, let's sit for one more minute in the main room as the morning gathers. The dust in the air is not an intrusion. It is a memory you can see. Sunlight pours in quiet, the kind of quiet that fills rather than empties. The rug holds its pattern. The bell over the door waits to ring. Somewhere behind the counter, a drawer gives a small, satisfied click, as if agreeing with everything we have just said. The shack is ready for another day of visitors who will leave believing in something they didn't plan to. We are ready for another chapter. The lantern light that guided us in still burns low and patient. It will do for reading as well as walking. When we open the first journal, the house leans closer. It knows this part. It has been waiting to hear it told gently. It always wanted the bedtime version, too. The first journal does not introduce itself, it waits. The cover is the color of old bark, the kind that learned patience from winter. A handprint glows on the front, like a promise that has already kept itself. When you lift it, there is a gravity to the pages that is not only paper. The spine clicks the way careful lock clicks, pleased to be opened by the right hands. Stanford wrote the way a river writes, consistent, deliberate, and better at telling the truth than the shore first realizes. His lines are tight. His margins carry small, lean notes that look like whispers that brought their best manners. Each entry begins with an observation that a less stubborn person would have ended with. He starts at conclusions because he has lived with the evidence long enough to be sure. Then he walks backward gently to show you how he found the path. He does not dramatize the strange, he measures it. A 3 a.m. hum near the West Ridge, amplitude noted, duration timed with a wristwatch that kept good faith with its owner. A print in the soft ground by the river, longer than a boot by the length of a matchstick. Weight distributed in a way that disagrees with the available bones. A seam of rock that turned the compass needle into a dancer. He sketches the scene as if afraid the moment might think better of itself and leave. He labels the sketch as if one day a friend will need to stand exactly there. In the margins, there are small arrows that point to questions. Why this shape? Why repetition at 8-day intervals? Why only at dawn? The questions do not clamor. They keep each other company. When he returns later, as he often does, he answers some and circles others for the future. A lot of science is refining the art of waiting. The journals are fluent in that art. Sometimes the ink thickens where the hand pressed too firmly. Those passages usually involve relief. Confirmed, not a hoax, not a dream. The ink thins and speeds up when gratitude arrives. Sample intact, specimen unharmed. You can feel the careful priorities. Curiosity first, care always. The Valley taught him that. You cannot interrogate a place into honesty. You learn to listen until it is ready to speak. On a page that smells faintly of pine, a list runs down the center. The list contains more caution than nouns. Do not enter alone. Prepare a second lantern. Bring bread, bring string, bring apology. He perfected the traveler's kit you cannot buy in any shop. A coil of forgiveness for doors you open too abruptly. A habit of leaving places as you found them, or a touch kinder than that. The second journal is heavier, not in weight, though it is that too, but in density of days. The entries here are longer. The sketches grow bolder, as if the hand has learned the cheek of drawing what only the heart has seen so far. The notes carry small pockets of wonder that he could not help but tuck into the sentences. A sound like glass learning to sing, a scent like rain with a different alphabet. He remains precise, but precision makes room for awe because awe properly kept is good data. It says something here exceeded the measurement. He is not alone in every margin. A few small, slanted annotations appear that belong to the future version of the same man, or to a friend who learned to write in the same room. Check calibration. Ask about the north window. Leave a map for the kids someday. The journals are not just records, they're instructions for handshakes with tomorrow. He is building bridges he will not always be the first to cross. Between pages, small things live. A pressed sprig that refused to brown in the ordinary way. A thread that came off a coat, that came off a night that did not care for coats. A rubbing from a carved stone that made the pencil feel shy. These are not trophies. They are memory anchors, modest and practical. They say, when you return to this thought, bring your senses along. The third journal breathes differently when you open it, the way rooms built underground sometimes do. The entries sharpen. The language trims itself until nothing but the spine of the idea remains. He is preparing to stand in front of something that will not forgive imaginary details. He diagrams fears the way he diagrams circuits, not to make them smaller, but to make them usable. Risk, isolation. Risk, obsession. Mitigation. Company if offered. Schedule if maintained. Letters even unsent. He writes the word listen in a hand that asks the word to please help. Not every page carries a finding. Many carry discipline. Return to the West Ridge at dawn, even if the ridge does not return to you. The journals teach the quieter half of discovery. Show up, even when the miracle forgot to set its alarm. A footnote proposes a rule that will save 2 summers and 1 person. If the valley ignores you for a week, consider the possibility it is teaching you to notice something else. Folded into the back, a map sketched with the humility of a guest. Trails marked in dotted lines, not as claims, but as acquaintances. Circles around places that might forgive a second visit. An X over one place that will not. The key reads, not safe alone. Not safe at all. Safe if loved. The journals are not a dare. They are a set of friends who prefer introductions. On one page, the hand hesitates and then continues in a calmer line. The sentence reads, if anyone is reading this who is not me, you have found what I found. Curiosity that can carry a person too far and just far enough. Carry a rope line of people's names back to yourself. He writes Stan first, because that is where the rope begins. He writes others, fewer than he would like, more than he expected. He leaves space after each because one day the list will lengthen, and he wants the paper to be ready. The journals do not end. They pause. The last entry is not a last line. It is a door left ajar, a question that finally learned to sit comfortably on a shelf beside food and sleep. The message between the lines is simple. Learn, but live with what you learn. He closes the book as gently as he opened it. The lamp on the table dims with the grace of a job done well. Somewhere upstairs, footsteps hesitate, then continue because the house has taught everyone to walk softly around the work that matters. If you place your hand on the covers, you can feel a small heat that is not from the lamp. It is the warmth of attention banked like coals. The journals are not magic. They are love made legible. We tuck them back lightly, and the room exhales the way a pine does in wind it trusts. Outside the window, an owl blinks as if to say, good notes. Morning in Gravity Falls is a stagehand, not a trumpet. Light moves through the branches with their permission. Dew gathers in deliberate commas and waits for the sentence of the day. This is the hour when the town's other residents stir. The ones who do not pay taxes but keep the economy of wonder solvent. We begin with the small. A gnome sneezes behind a stump and then pretends he didn't. The way a person pretends they weren't looking at the dessert menu. He tightens his tiny belt because belts make a person feel prepared. Gnomes have the confidence of creatures who know they are often underestimated. They stack themselves into narratives when the occasion demands, But on quiet mornings, they collect buttons and hold polite arguments with berries about the difference between red and really red. If you give a gnome a compliment, he will try to turn it into a transaction and then catch himself and say thank you in a voice that hopes you heard how much he meant it. Under a log, something with too many knees considers a leaf with a scholar's patience. It has learned that not all green tastes the same. It moves in the measured way of a creature that has nothing to prove and every reason to proceed carefully. When you watch long enough, the odd turns into the ordinary and then into the lovely. That is the way with many of the valley citizens. Your eyes need time to soften into the correct focus, the one that lets respect in. At the river, the water says the same thing it said yesterday and means new things by it. A shape rises under the surface and breaks it like a gentle thought. The multi-bear lifts his many opinions into the cool air and sneezes in 7 keys. He looks like a riddle that chose kindness as its answer. He has a favorite patch of sunlight and a favorite length of silence, and on good days, a favorite joke told by no one in particular. He keeps secrets the way a hill keeps echoes, by offering them back only when asked nicely. In a clearing, Manitors practice the art of being loud with integrity. They lift stones and set them down in exactly the right place to make a path that leads somewhere worth walking. Their fur holds dust like metals. Their voices carry to the tree line and make the needles vibrate in agreement. They are not cruel. They are thorough. When they argue, the earth listens to the stomping but cares more about the sincerity. A Manitor will help you if you ask sincerely enough to impress his grandmother. In the shade, a small thing with too many teeth hums a lullaby to a smaller thing with exactly the right number of teeth. The lullaby has been in the forest longer than any map. It is only 4 notes, the oldest ones. The little one sleeps. The big one blinks simply because blinking is a free pleasure. If you walk past, the big one will give you a look that asks you to cherish what you cherish and mind your own business otherwise. That is fair. There are creatures here who arrive only on Tuesdays, as if bound by an appointment with the sky. They look like birds written by an over-enthusiastic fountain pen. They land on fence posts, nod at the universe, and take a pebble each because pebbles have always been reasonable currency in ecosystems that value modesty. They leave before noon because noon asks questions they are not interested in answering. In the marsh, a chorus of frogs rehearses for no audience and every audience. They fine-tune the crucial note that lets the night know the day can end on a good sentence. Their music instructs certain flowers to open and certain insects to call a friend. If you wave, a frog will not wave back. He will adjust the tempo and consider your presence as a rhythm instrument. This is an honor. Not every creature means well at first meeting. The Gremloblin dislikes being misunderstood and therefore chooses confrontation as an icebreaker. He advances, snorts, makes an announcement about territory, and then waits to see if you will answer with disrespect or with clear, calm boundary setting. If you choose the second, he will back up 2 paces and deliver a brief lecture on the importance of tone. After that, you are on fine terms and may share a sandwich if you brought one. Bring 2 if you know what's good for you. There are beings here that do not strictly fit the word creature. Patches of fog with initiative. Shadows that hold their shape like people who stand for too long in a museum. A root system that has taught itself to deliver messages between trees that are not technically related. On some afternoons, a rumor moves through the underbrush with the precision of a needle threading a familiar hem. If you listen, you can make out the subject. Someone's kindness, someone's mistake. The weather's planned to rain only where the tomatoes want it. The bestiary in Ford's journals reads like a set of bedtime stories that got a degree in field biology. He notes behavioral patterns that look like myth until you collect enough instances to tabulate them. He learned that most beings here adore routine because routine reduces unfortunate surprises. If you knock on a stump 3 times politely, the resident, if any, will respond with industry-standard knocks, indicating willingness to chat or desire for solitude. If you leave a gift, make it practical. Twine, a thimble, a small bell with a modest voice. Leave it without expectation. Gifts only become obligations if you visit too often to see whether they've been used. Dipper learns quickly because curiosity that wears respect learns quickly. He keeps his voice low, not out of fear, but out of wisdom. Mabel learns lovingly because care that wears delight makes allies faster than rules do. She names things, but only after asking whether they already have a name. If they do, she pronounces it as best she can and makes the sound into a friendship. Soothe walks the wood with a cadence the ground appreciates. He knows how to step on roots without waking them. He knows how to fix a birdhouse that technically belongs to nobody and therefore to everybody. Wendy moves through like wind that knows which branch needs a hand. She does not intrude. She participates. The forest keeps a short list of humans whose steps it likes. Their names are on it. Some nights, something enormous passes beyond the ridge, close enough to be heard and too far to be defined. The valley records the sound in a low drawer and labels it later. That is a category the journals respect. Later is not avoidance. It is guardianship of the present. The creatures keep their counsel. The people keep their good sense. The stars, indifferent and generous, keep their places. If you had to summarize the rules, you could do it without words. Raise your hand as if greeting a neighbor. Set things down gently where you found them. Eat what you brought. Leave better paths than the ones you used. And when you go, thank the air. It works hard here. When dawn rounds the corner into morning, the creatures transition from ritual to routine. The gnomes conduct a small meeting about acorn storage and adjourn for snacks. The multi-bear chooses a second patch of sunlight as a hedge against clouds. The manitors run a victory lap for no reason other than that legs are happy when used. If you return to town and say you saw nothing, that is okay. The forest knows what it showed you. It knows also what it kept. Both choices were kind. There is a clock in Gravity Falls that never lies and never tells the whole truth. It hangs in the diner where the coffee pours like a reliable river. It ticks with the honest rhythm of gears that were oiled by someone who sang to them. It shows the hour and the minute and neglects, politely, the deeper matter. Time here is not a straight road with a speed limit and the occasional billboard. It is a country lane that doubles back to point at a view you missed. Blendon runs his errands through that lane with the briskness of an employee whose boss is a spreadsheet and whose colleagues are historic events. He appears, apologizes to no one in particular for the disturbance, and adjusts a thread you could not see until he touched it. He is not careless. He is not entirely in control. Time, even with tools, behaves like a cat, cooperative on its own terms. The journals treat time like a laboratory that insisted on being outdoors. Ford measures drift at the North Ridge and finds the seconds stretch like taffy on warm afternoons. He sets 2 identical clocks 10 yards apart and watches them disagree like cousins who both think they remember the family recipe. He notes that songbirds do not care. Their dawn is when dawn behaves itself for birds, not for people. This observation pleases him. Reality keeps its priorities sane. You learn to tell time by other instruments. The angle of light on the side of the shack, the tone the river uses to greet rocks, the way the fog uses names when it introduces itself to grass. Dipper, who likes watches and charts and the safety their grids offer, adapts. He wears a watch and also a habit of looking up at the sky as if it were an older friend bidding him to loosen his tie. Mabel measures time in sweater rows and in the distance between two laps. Her method proves unusually resistant to paradox. The valley experiences loops the way a town experiences festivals. They arrive, decorate the square in their own style, teach an old lesson in a new hat, and leave footprints that become part of the main street. A day might repeat itself with minor edits. A conversation might finish and then begin again with a detail corrected because the heart needed the second try. People do not always notice. When they do, they still have chores and groceries still need carrying. Paradox is not a crime here. It is a reminder that definitions have edges, and edges are where the interesting plants grow. Ford diagrams paradoxes with arrows that respect each other. He notes that cause and effect can choose to share the same chair for an evening without starting a fight. He writes, "When in doubt, behave ethically in the version of now you can touch." It is the kind of sentence that belongs on a fridge, and for a time it lives there, held by a magnet shaped like a trout. Time, baby, floats through the larger narrative like a law printed in big letters hung too high to read comfortably. He frowns at violations the way a librarian frowns at noise and then returns to his own work, which is enormous and therefore invisible in the daily. His enforcement arrives in bursts. His tolerance arrives in seasons. He cares about scale, and the town, small and stubborn, benefits from that scale's blind spot. The valley conducts its gentle experiments mostly under his radar, the way a violin practices scales in a house where the piano is busy being important. The portal was a conversation with time that began in ambition and continued in mathematics and was answered partly in grief. We are not here to turn up the volume. We will say only that time objects to being forced and responds graciously to being invited. Ford learned that difference at a cost he did not want to charge to anyone else's account. He wrote 3 words that serve better than warning labels. Ask, don't yank. Science grows up when it adopts manners. Not all time play belongs to machines and men with journals. Around the West Meadow, at the precise hour when sunset becomes hospitality, fireflies reconstruct a pattern they remember from a century that has not happened yet. They do this happily, with no concern for the philosophical implications. If you stand in the pattern, your heart catches up to something it thought it had lost, or reaches ahead to something it will one day possess. You will call it nostalgia or hope, depending on the shoes you're wearing. The fireflies call it evening. Children sense the bends first because they are shorter and closer to the ground's opinion. A kid will stop in the street, turn in a circle, and say, "Wait with authority." Then they will pick up a coin they dropped earlier today, even though you watched them spend it. Or they will finish a joke you have been trying to remember since last winter. Or they will hug you slightly before you need it and then wander off to chase a dog. Adults call this coincidence because adults named a lot of things that needed kinder names. The Valley calls it calibration. Rules exist, of course. If you meet yourself, you treat yourself as a guest, not a challenge. Offer water. Ask how you can help. Exchange a fact that will save both of you a burden. Do not attempt irony. It ages poorly along a Mobius strip. If you accidentally step into yesterday, keep your hands out of the drawers. If you stumble into tomorrow, admire the furniture, but change nothing. And if you are granted the mercy of a redo, use it to add kindness, never to edit truth. Blendon, who has a soft spot for people who try their best with fewer instructions than ideal, occasionally leaves a small courtesy behind when he corrects a wrinkle. A candy on a windowsill that will be discovered at the right moment. A door ajar that would have stuck in a storm. He is not supposed to do this. Time prefers clean stitches, not embroidery. But a universe that allows coffee also permits small mercies, and the ledger balances. Stan looks at paradox the way a shopkeeper looks at a customer who brings a goat into the store, with resignation and a plan. He does not pretend to understand the algebra. He understands the stakes. If today is going to happen twice, he wants the second copy to have better snacks. If a conversation needs repeating, he repeats it without sighing. He trusts the twins to do the rest. They do. Soothe finds paradoxes by accident and survives them by sincerity. If asked whether he is confused, he says "kinda man" and then does the most decent thing available. Time, which can be brutal with cheaters and bored with cynics, tends to pat Suze on the head and let him through. Wendy treats loops the way a good lumberjack treats a knot in wood, with the right blade and the right patience. She goes on break at the same minute as herself and returns at the same time, with the same shortened shift. The schedule loves her for it. Dipper will always want to chart the bends, to build a model that predicts the next soft corner. He will get closer than most. He will also learn, because Gravity Falls teaches this as gently as it can, that prediction is not the same as peace. Peace comes when you make the right choice without the guarantee of applause. He writes that sentence down once, and later, when a day folds in half and asks him to choose again, he reads it and nods and chooses well. Mabel will always love now best. She honors tomorrow by decorating today. When the loop releases, as it always does, people remember her laugh more than they remember the details of what the calendar tried to do. That is not an accident. That is a technology more durable than clocks. Joy is the anchor point. If you need a final rule, make it this: return gently. When the loop closes, when the line straightens, when the detour merges back into the main road, do not slam doors. Say thank you to the version of you who carried the extra hour. Say sorry if you borrowed grace you didn't quite deserve. Put the chairs back under the table. Check that the porch light is off. Step into the next minute with clean hands. At the diner, the clock still ticks like a friendly metronome. The pie is still too good for the price. The waitress still knows how long you intend to stay by the way you set your spoon down. Out the window, the street looks like it always looks, which is to say, ready for the exact amount of miracle a day can safely carry. The town does not pretend to be normal. It is better than that. It is kind to time and expects time to be kind back most days. When you stand up, your chair legs make a sound that reminds you of summer camp and library chairs and first apartments and last goodbyes. That is time being generous at the small scale, which is the only scale that truly touches skin. You pay, tip well, and walk outside into a light that has every reason to be here. Somewhere a calendar flips without drama. Somewhere else a watch is a gift. In the center of town, the hours arrive like good neighbors, on time with something for the table. We'll keep the lantern steady for the next stretch. From here, we can turn toward the cipher that learned to smile and the brothers who learned to forgive. But for now, let the seconds land softly like pine needles. The forest approves. The journals close with a pleasant click. The creatures settle in their shadows. The diner door stops swinging. Time, for once, walks beside us at our pace and does not rush ahead. Here we go, lamps low, pages open, voice soft. A triangle with one eye is not much to look at until it looks back. On a napkin, it's a doodle. In a field, carved into a stone that refuses moss, it becomes a signpost. In dreams, it is a door you can't quite remember closing. The cipher shows up first as a pattern, on pages, in corners, across a wheel where familiar faces sit like quiet numbers on a clock. The shape is simple because simple shapes carry easily. They travel through time and paper and memory with less friction than details do. Gravity Falls is full of symbols that do their jobs without asking for attention. Boundary marks, logging stamps, old family initials burned into the underside of a chair. But the cipher has a way of turning up in places where no stamp should be. A journal entry about beetle migration will suddenly include a small triangle in the margin, not as a decoration, but as if the pen agreed to draw it on its own. A weather vane will point firmly west on a windless night, its arrow cutting the sky at the same angle the symbol prefers. These are not accidents. They are introductions. Ford did not choose the symbol the way you choose an emblem for a club. He discovered it the way you discover a melody that's already been playing, by finally hearing it. Signals ran through the valley like thin wires long before he arrived. He tuned himself to them with patience, adjusted the dials until the static stepped aside, and there it was. A bounding set of rules that gathered into a personality, a bargain hunter among patterns, a voice that liked to answer questions with a price tag still attached. The cipher does not have mass, not in the ordinary way, but it has preferences. It likes thresholds, because thresholds are always in negotiation. Hallway to room, wake to sleep, problem to solution. It likes a watcher's posture, because watching is power if you never blink. And it likes offering help to people who rarely accept it, because refusal is a kind of worship. This does not make it a myth. It makes it a neighbor whose invitations always include small print. A wheel of symbols sits in one of the journals, crisp and clean, shadows of things we already know, a vest, a pine, a handprint, a question mark. The wheel is not a lock, or not only a lock, it's a calendar for events that don't have dates. It's a language that uses pictures because pictures are hard to mispronounce. It points outward as much as inward. Toward a dozen ways, the cipher touches lives it cannot live. Wheels are honest. They rotate. What is on top will move. The cipher understands that better than most things do. Its whole trick is motion disguised as inevitability. When it speaks, it rarely uses a mouth. It prefers neat arrangements that answer questions a little too quickly. A dream with a helpful stranger who knows exactly where to tap on the stuck door. A burst of insight landing right when you've grown tired enough to accept it. A joke that is funny because it is cruel and fine because you laughed. It is not the only voice that offers shortcuts, but it is very good at it, and the valley, whose rules relax more often than they break, can serve as a stage for its pitch. Dipper meets the cipher in the way curious people often meet trouble. Inside a question he was not wrong to ask. He wants clarity, direction, edges that hold. The cipher promises guidance in exchange for nothing more than a little access. It preys on urgency, not because urgency is weak, but because urgency makes people tidy. Tidy minds love bargains, clear terms, clean results. The cipher provides those until payment comes due. Mabel meets the cipher differently, with an instinct that recognizes when kindness is being used as bait. Her resilience is not armor. It's sunlight showing where the shadows want to go. Stan meets the cipher as a businessman meets a slick supplier. Plenty of deal-making posture, more suspicion than he admits, and a clear line ready to draw the moment the price climbs. Ford meets it as a colleague he despises, respecting the method, doubting the motive, tempted by the data. Wendy meets it as a warning sign stapled to a tree. Don't touch. Go around. Sows meets it as a magic show where the trick is obvious but still enjoyable until it isn't. If the cipher were merely a villain, the defense would be simpler. Say no. Lock doors, throw salt. But it isn't only an antagonist. It's an accelerant. It takes what's already there, ambition, fear, love, guilt, and adds heat. That's why it shows up in dreams. Dreams are rooms where furniture moves itself. If it can persuade a dreamer to accept a new layout, waking life often follows with less resistance. In the journals Ford tracks rules the cipher seems to obey. It cannot create trust out of nothing. It has to borrow. It cannot force an invitation. It has to be let in. It cannot learn a person's true name. It has to be told what name to use. These are old magic rules, stapled to a modern bulletin board. They hold because consent matters at every scale. The cipher looks powerful. Consent is power quietly multiplied. Codes scatter across town like seeds. Back of menu ciphers that decode to harmless jokes. Tree mark patterns that lead nowhere but get you to take a beautiful walk. Radio bursts that promise answers and deliver riddles that are mostly reminders. These decoys teach a habit. Look twice, ask twice, then take only what you can carry without hurting someone. It's a safety drill disguised as a scavenger hunt. The cipher loves misdirection. So does Gravity Falls. The difference is intent. The town hides to preserve delight and to buy time for explanations. The cipher hides to profit from delay. You can hear the difference if you listen for it. One feels like a surprise party that actually knows you. The other feels like a contract written in a font that makes your eyes tired. And then there is the dreamscape, the room behind the eyelids where rules sleep lightly. The cipher is strong there in the way graffiti is strong on a wall no one scrubs. But even there, counters exist. Anchors, objects and memories that belong to you so deeply that even a trickster risks getting snagged. A pine tree drawn in a margin by a boy whose hand shook but kept going. A sweater knit by a girl who believed in color as a weapon against gray. A photograph of two brothers taped back together, not because tape is elegant, but because it holds. The cipher can't eat those. It can only glare. There's a quiet counter-charm that Gravity Falls favors against any fast-talking pattern. Daily work done well. Sweeping floors, labeling jars, cooking pancakes, telling the truth in small portions. The cipher grows bored where there's nothing fancy to grab. Boredom is not defeat, but it is distance. Distance buys choice. Choice builds fences with gates that swing only for friends. So the symbol persists. Eye open, line straight, promise is easy. It sits on the wheel, shows up in chalk, rides a whisper. It is not gone when the day is done. But neither is the knowledge that every offer can be read twice, and every shortcut, if rejected, becomes exactly what it always was, a detour that didn't earn the trip. We close this chapter with a simple rule that Ford writes on an index card and tapes near his lamp. If an answer arrives too fast, ask whom it serves. The cipher hates that sentence. That alone makes it worth keeping. Every family has arguments. Most end with a door closing softly, then opening again later when someone remembers the milk. The Pines brothers wore their argument the way mountains wear snow, part weather, part identity, stubborn even in spring. The war between Stan and Ford did not announce itself with drums. It arrived the way distance arrives, one step, then another, until it felt like geography. They began, as we remember, with a coin flipped for the pleasure of hearing it sing. Two boys on a shore building a shared future out of cardboard and certainty. The coin was a toy. Later it became a metaphor neither of them would have chosen. Heads, plans, tails, survival. Heads, the lab, tails, the shack. When the coin landed poorly one afternoon, bad timing, bad words, a bad angle that made blame feel easy, they each grabbed a side and pulled. The coin bent. So did they. Ford's path tightened into equations and probabilities, into diagrams no one else could hold steady. A brilliant mind climbed a brilliant ladder, rung by careful rung, and by the top the air had thinned. He did not notice at first. Thin air feels like clarity until you try to speak. Stan's path widened into hustle and protection, into deals that kept roofs from leaking and kids from worrying about lunch. A loyal heart built a storefront around a promise. I'll figure it out. He did not notice at first that figuring it out alone rearranges your posture. You hunch. You keep secrets. To spare others the weight. You build rooms behind rooms because maybe one more will finally be enough. The war did not have battles in the usual sense. It had moments. Two brothers in a driveway using old words like always and never, as if those words had ever told the truth. Two brothers in a study not looking at each other because looking would turn anger into grief, and neither of them had time for that. Two brothers in a town that prefers surfaces to heal overnight, if people will let them. They did not for a while. Pride is a good carpenter. It builds sturdy walls. People choose different strategies when they feel unseen. Ford rode harder. Stan performed harder. Ford doubled down on caution, certain that one more measure of control would finally make the future safe for everyone. Stan doubled down on risk, certain that one more leap would finally make the present safe for everyone. The irony is gentle and obvious. Both were trying to protect the same people, starting with each other, from consequences that came anyway. The town, which has seen families fracture and repair, kept setting the table for two even when only one sat down. That's what small places do. They offer rituals until someone remembers how to use them. Suze learned how to knock on doors that were technically shut. Wendy learned how to talk with half an eyebrow and get the truth with no one losing face. The twins learned how to love both men without pretending the war was finished. Children are rarely fooled by adult scripts. They accept contradictions because they live with them daily, right next to curiosity and bedtime. There were apologies rehearsed and never delivered. Letters written and unsent. Messages in bottles that washed up on the wrong shore. But there were also small truces. Stan keeping coffee hot in the kitchen when he knew Ford had been up all night. Ford fixing a creak in the stairs he never used because he heard Mabel trip once and didn't want to hear it again. These are the stitches that hold fabric even when the tear remains. They prove that a war can pause without ending, and that pause matters. The town's rules about time brushed this war gently, too. Some days felt like repeats, the same misunderstanding running the same route, almost comfortingly predictable. Some days bent differently. A conversation started with a question instead of a complaint. Gravity Falls allows retakes if your heart's in the right place. The brothers took some. They squandered others. Progress is a messy series. The turning points weren't cinematic, they were practical. A crisis forced both to pick the same side at the same second. A child's question made an adult answer with more honesty than habit. A shared memory, silly, specific from a long-ago boardwalk, punched through a wall and aired out a room. The war cracked. Not in triumph, but in the way ice gives a warning sound before it breaks, asking travelers to listen. Forgiveness arrived as work, not as fireworks. Stan had to admit the harm that loyalty can do when it insists on acting alone. Ford had to admit the harm that genius can do when it treats company as a variable rather than a requirement. They had to say the sentences that cost pride and bought peace. I was wrong in these ways. I'm sorry in those ones. I want to try in a new way now. The town, nosy and kind, pretended not to hear and made room anyway. There is a scene the house remembers better than the people do. Late, quiet. 2 men in the kitchen, one washing, one drying. The sort of small cooperation that families use to retrain muscle memory. No speech worth repeating. No dramatic hugs. Just the rhythm of plates moving from soapy to shelf. The ritual that had been theirs as boys when dishes seemed like the worst possible destiny. They stood there and did a chore correctly, and something in the air thanked them. The war did not end that night, but it ran out of ammunition. The last weapon to fall was stubbornness, disguised as identity. Both had told themselves convincing stories. I am the brother who fixes things with my hands. I am the brother who fixes things with my mind. The truer story took its seat at the table. We fix things together or not at all. It sounds simple, written down. In practice, it's a daily re-choosing. They chose. Enough times that the choice began choosing them back. If you ask the valley what it thinks of the war, it will rustle the trees in a way that means every long friendship has one. Good ones survive. If you ask the shack, it will creak a board that learned their footsteps again, finally in rhythm. If you ask the journals, they will open to the page where a note in the margin reads, Stan will hate this plan until it saves the day. Remember to say thank you out loud. Reconciliation is not a finish line. It is a trail marker you look for and then look for again the next mile. The brothers reached it, walked on, circled back, reached it again. People in town stopped bracing when they walked into the shops together. Children in the house stopped listening for sharp words and learned to listen for shared laughter, which returned like a bird that tries 3 springs and finally stays for a 4th. In the end, the war turned into a history lesson they didn't have to teach verbally. The twins learned how to disagree without picking up shovels. Suze learned that choosing sides can be honorable when the side you choose is honesty itself. Wendy learned, though she probably knew already, that loyalty tells the truth best when it admits limits. The Valley learned nothing new. It simply nodded and rolled on. It has seen worse and better. It prefers better. What remains between the brothers now is not blankness where the hurt was. It is a scar you can feel if you press, a raised line that confirms both injury and healing. It's useful. Scars remind you which motions require care and which stories deserve gentleness. The brothers are careful and gentle, more often than not. When they aren't, they know how to fix it faster. That's the secret war. Fought in kitchens and workshops, fought with silence and then with sentences, fought until the fighting itself grew tired and lay down. If you open the front door of the shack early one morning and see 2 men arguing amiably about the correct angle for a repair, smile. You are witnessing a truce doing its job. Some doors are built to keep weather out. Some are built to keep people in. A few are built because a mind looked at a boundary and said, what if this is a hinge? The portal began as diagrams, then as parts, then as a room that hummed with the ambition of 1,000 careful steps. It was not an accident. It was the result of patience married to hunger. When it lit, the air learned a new verb. The principles are simple only in the way mountain silhouettes are simple. Energy arranged into a shape that taught space to do a trick. Anchors sunk into the hardest rock the valley would lend. Calibration that learned the valley's accent before speaking. Ford's notes read like prayers to an exacting God. Tolerances within tolerance. Seals sealed. Fail-safes failing safely. He wanted a window. Windows have a way of becoming doors and structures that love momentum. The first activation was a cathedral of small sounds. Relays acknowledging their duty. Cooling fans negotiating with heat. A tone too low to hear except in your bones. Light gathered not in a flash, but in a presence, as if a new color had arrived and was politely asking where to sit. The room didn't brighten so much as acquire depth. You could look at the doorway and feel the muscle in your neck choose either awe or fear, and not be wrong either way. What lay beyond was not a place Ford could map immediately. It was a set of coordinates woven from rules he half understood. He sent measurements first. He sent small objects with trackers. He sent a camera and got back images that made sense in 2 dimensions and argued in 3. Then he sent himself in the way explorers always eventually do, equipped, sure. Braver than wise, because bravery and wisdom share a border that is easy to cross in fog. Time stretched differently there, as we know, because the journals changed tone. Margins grow sparse, as if the hand writing them had to work harder to keep memory aligned with ink. Observations stay crisp. Emotion sneaks in where even his discipline can't block it. Saw angles that refused rightness. Heard music written in materials, not notes. Felt watched by geometry. He was not alone, not quite. He was alone enough. Back in the shack, the portal's afterglow affected everything. Clocks argued. Magnets sulked. A bowl of strawberries tasted like they had opinions. Stan encountered the machinery as a man encounters a storm front, assessing damage, planning repairs, calculating whether the harvest can be saved. He made choices. Some were mistakes that looked brave. Some were bravery that looked like mistakes until later. Keeping the lights on is simple work in principle and brutal in practice. He chose the kind of stubborn that keeps people fed. He paid for it in gray hair and stories he didn't tell because no one should have to carry every chapter. There is a version of the tale where the portal is merely a villain's device, another where it's a hero's crown. Gravity Falls prefers truer versions. It's a tool built by love of knowledge and used by love of family. Tools get dangerous when either love forgets to consult the other. The portal forced consultations. It turned private obsessions into public emergencies, and private sacrifices into public miracles. That is a lot to ask of a room full of bolts. When the portal took, it took decisively. The valley flinched. The house groaned. The people adjusted because people always adjust first and think later. Dipper and Mabel adjusted by believing and then by planning. Belief is its own equipment. Planning is what you carry when belief must share the load. Suze adjusted by building bridges to problems with whatever lumber was handy. Jokes, sandwiches, spare parts. Wendy adjusted by standing exactly where she was needed and not 1 inch farther, the geometry of steadiness. Bringing someone back from beyond a door like that feels impossible until it becomes maintenance. Tighten this, align that, hold here. Don't let go even when your hands say they're done. Rescue is an engineering discipline and a moral one. It requires calculations that only matter because the people doing them matter. The portal, for all its menace, agreed to this logic once it was presented with enough persistence. Machines are not immune to love's math. They just require clarity of inputs. What Ford found beyond is less important tonight than what he brought back with him. Yes, knowledge. Maps that look like lace. Words that behave like switches. Warnings that saved afternoons. But also a revised hierarchy. Answers come second. People come first. You can read the revision to his handwriting once he's home. Sentences shorten not because he's less brilliant, but because he's more humble. Tested, works, not worth cost. It's the most expensive line in any scientist's notebook and the most valuable. We do not downplay what it cost Stan to keep the portal alive long enough to flip it into a rescue. He wore the shack like armor. He wore guilt like a cape. He wore out shoes on floors no one else admitted existed. He counted money that had to stretch across plans and groceries and nights when kids needed the illusion that grown-ups sleep soundly. He did not always choose well. He chose always with love. The portal doesn't care about motives. Outcomes are its only grammar. People do care about motives. That's why there's still a kitchen table where the brothers can sit and drink coffee without flinching. The beyond is not gone when the portal shuts. It lingers like light behind eyelids. Certain corners of the shack feel wider now in the way a suitcase feels heavier after you unpack it. The town picked up a small hum it didn't have before. A memory tone you can hear in the laundromat if the room is empty and the last dryer is winding down. The valley is a little more itself, not less. That's what happens when doors open and close without breaking the frame. There are rules posted now, handwritten, polite, firm. No one goes alone. No one goes hungry. No one goes without telling 3 people and leaving a note where the dog can find it. These rules apply to portals and to difficult conversations and to road trips and to afternoons you think you should spend suffering quietly. The house likes the rules. It keeps them in the kind of drawer that never sticks anymore. Sometimes late, the portal's room gets a visit from someone who promises they are just checking the seals. They are. They also sit for a minute and let the quiet say what words would bruise. Rooms keep confidences. The portal room has learned to be gentle. It could be loud again if asked. It hopes not to be. The question people ask, even if they don't say it out loud, was it worth it? The Valley has an answer it gives to all such questions. Worth is not a single number. It's a ledger you keep with others. Alone, no. Together, sometimes yes, sometimes no. Sometimes we'll see. The portal taught the town how to keep that ledger without cheating on the math. The final balance, as of this quiet evening, favors love surviving its own brilliance. And beyond? Beyond still exists. Not as a temptation now, but as a fact. Somewhere out there, geometry tries new angles, and music rehearses in materials, and rules we haven't met yet go about their business without malice. We don't need to chase them tonight. We need to sleep. The door is shut, the latches hold, and the house sits like a boat in a safe harbor. If dreams want to walk near the edge, they will bring good shoes and better friends. We leave the room, pull the chain on the lamp, and listen to the cooling of metal, a sound that always means you did enough for now. In the hallway, the air is ordinary on purpose. Downstairs, a chair waits by a window. Outside, the pines keep time for the town with the slow metronome of wind. Tomorrow we'll have the next chapter. Tonight has this one, and it is enough. Weirdmageddon did not arrive like a storm you could see on a radar. It arrived like a rule taking off its tie. The sky learned new colors with old names. Triangles learned to grin with their whole geometry. Streets folded their elbows where streets should be straight. Gravity, polite for so long, excused itself to get some fresh air. If you stood in the square at the first minute of the first day, you would have noticed how sound changed first. Bells rang with echo that felt deeper than the air could hold. Storefront glass vibrated as if it remembered being sand and considered applying for the job again. Radio stations began to interview their own static. It was, in every way that matters, a dream marching with its boots on. Bill loved it. Of course he did. The cipher had spent a long time as a visitor in people's sleep. A trophy hunter who preferred the guided tour. Weirdmageddon gave him keys to the museum. He did not wander quietly. He rearranged exhibits and called it progress. He gave roads new ambitions and asked clocks to speak only when spoken to. He sang the kind of song that sounds like laughing until you listen to the lyrics. Well, the town bent. Not because it wanted to, but because it had always been flexible, and flexibility, pushed hard enough, looks like surrender. Fences leaned toward conversations they couldn't quite join. Mailboxes shook out letters that had spent decades keeping secrets. The sign at the shack lost a letter and discovered it liked the hole better than the vowel. Somewhere, a squirrel achieved higher consciousness and used it to misfile acorns with conviction. People held, which is what people do. When the outside world forgets how to be reasonable, the inside world, kitchens, back rooms, pockets with pictures in them, tightens its laces. The resistance did not begin with speeches. It began with doors closed against wind that had learned to whisper names. It began with grocery lists that refused to be intimidated by a shelf that now extended into a second dimension. It began with children calling their dogs and dogs arriving, because loyalty is the one law that doesn't care what shape the sky takes. The shack learned its part quickly. Tourists gone, theater closed, workshop open, chapel open, kitchen open. Stan moved chairs the way a captain moves sailors, with orders that sound like jokes and land like anchors. Sue's built practical miracles out of scrap and love. Wendy stood on thresholds and kept the line. The twins did what good hearts do under pressure. They listened for what mattered, and then carried it carefully through rooms that had decided to argue with their own corners. Every resistance needs a language. Gravity Falls chose ordinary, the dialect that looks like casseroles and check-ins and maps folded into pockets, not to predict routes, but to remind hands where to go when fear empties them. Dipper translated the threat into tasks. Mabel translated the tasks into reasons. Neither translation was complete without the other. That is how you make meaning during a siege. You convert panic into steps and steps into care. Weirdmageddon offered bargains every hour, fast fixes with slow ruins, easy victories that brought debt collectors you couldn't see yet. The town declined politely when it could, and impolitely when it had to. Declining is a skill. Gravity Falls had practiced. Nothing teaches boundaries like a valley that loves you and constantly invites you into rooms you shouldn't enter without a buddy and a sandwich. Not everything held. Some things cracked. A few people made deals because fear speaks fluent contract. A few memories shook loose and skittered under furniture no one could move until later. But enough held. Enough always has to hold. That's how bridges work. They carry the load not because every board is perfect, but because enough boards say, we'll do it together. The fight, when it came to fighting, did not look heroic most of the time. It looked like endurance. Get up, fix the hinge, share the map. Say the name of the person next to you in the dark so they know they aren't alone. Hold the line not because you'll be congratulated, but because the line is where the children sleep. Bill performed. He always does. He tried to make cruelty entertaining and absurdity inevitable. But even in a nightmare, applause is optional. The town chose not to clap. It chose to look at the person beside it instead of the spectacle in front of it. That is a power villains constantly underestimate. Attention deployed as a weapon of care. When the last push came, when plans snapped into place, when promises were kept, when a wheel of symbols finally acted like a wheel and turned, Weirdmageddon discovered something Bill never planned for. Limits. Consent can be withdrawn even inside a dream. Love can coordinate even when language fails. Sacrifice can be offered without leaking glory all over the floor. And a town can decide, quietly, to return to itself. The sky unclenched. Colors return to the palette that lets tomatoes ripen, and children draw houses with yellow windows at night. Streets found their shoulders. Fences resumed their ordinary posture, which is forgiveness. The squirrel retained higher consciousness and now uses it to curate avant-garde acorn installations. This is acceptable. After, the town did not cheer. It cooked. It hammered. It swept. Joy, properly expressed, looks like maintenance. People slept so hard the beds felt proud. The shack kept its doors open late for those who needed to sit under a light that didn't blink. The journals gained new pages about thresholds crossed and the price of admission. The cipher, faded back to symbol, stripped of stage and megaphone, lurks. Of course it does. But lurking is different from ruling. And the town knows now in its muscle that nightmares end when enough hands hold. Weirdmageddon's legacy isn't rubble. It's the habit of asking a better question. What do we build so that the next impossible day finds us ready? The answers are small and daily. Fresh batteries, clear labels, names said often, out loud. Stories told before sleep that end with a person being loved where they live. That's how you make a place disaster resistant. You teach it how to remember itself. The forest approved. The river resumed its favorite key. The neon sign found its letter and put it back, just a little crooked, to honor the truth. Perfection doesn't hold. Persistence does. When people make lists of the town's miracles, they forget the ordinary one. Friendship that arrives like weather and stays like climate. The great forces, portals, paradox, symbols with opinions, matter. But the arc that keeps the roof on is written in small company. Two kids who share snacks without tally. A boss who learns how to be an uncle. Co-workers who become siblings because the calendar insists on putting them in the same room on the hour. Dipper, voice steadying year by year, speaks in maps and questions. He is not defined by answers. He is defined by the courage to ask better. People think bravery means moving fast. He learns and teaches that sometimes bravery is admitting you need 5 more minutes to think because thinking keeps people unharmed. He still loves the crisp click of a solved riddle. He loves more the solved day, everyone home, everyone fed, everyone known. Mabel is a festival disguised as a person. She believes that joy is an infrastructure project. She spends freely in the town's chosen currency, color, compliment, invitation. Her craft box is a public works department. Her sweaters are policy. She can be hurt because hope makes soft places. She heals because hope also makes communities. If Weirdmageddon was a lecture from a bad teacher, Mabel is the student who starts a study group, brings snacks, and makes sure everyone passes anyway. Wendy is balance. She stands like a tree built at the good angle. She laughs on the beat that says, "We're fine even if we aren't yet." She declines drama with a skill that should be taught in schools. When lines need holding, she holds them without becoming a wall. When kids need a model, she offers one, so casual they don't realize they've been mentored until 2 summers later, when they stand like she stood and calm arrives because posture was contagious. Soothe is a kindness engineer. He builds solutions out of what is at hand, tape, bolts. A story that makes a scared person laugh at the right second. He understands that repairing a popcorn machine and repairing a bad day are the same craft. Remove the screw that doesn't belong. Replace the spring that lost its spring. Test with care. Celebrate the click. He insists he is nobody's hero. This is how real heroes talk when they're busy. Stan is protection with a sense of humor. He leads by pretending he isn't, because he knows people like to feel like the plan was theirs. He hoards guilt until someone pries it out of his hands and trades it for coffee and a better night of sleep. He is not finished learning how to apologize or how to accept one. He is finished pretending he isn't needed. He doesn't announce the change. He shows up. Ford is brilliance learning hospitality. He sets an extra chair in the lab. He writes notes that assume successors, not just readers. He has begun to show the work of his heart as clearly as the work of his hands. On some afternoons, you can catch him smiling at a puzzle without opening a tool drawer because the presence of the people in the house has already solved the part that counted most. Town friendships thread outward. The diner waitress who refills cups like she's watering a garden. The sheriff who learned to listen before narrating. The man at the hardware store who knows which screw you need by the sound your pocket wrench makes when you mention the project. The gnome who pretends not to wave and waves anyway. The multi-bear who shares shade on hot days. Community is not a plot twist, it's the genre. Found bonds are the town's main export. You walk in a stranger, leave with a person who will come when you call, even if you're wrong about what you need. The Shack is a matchmaking service for competencies. This one can lift. That one can label. This one can talk to shy machines until they agree to start. That one can talk to shy people until they agree to rest. Together, they are what safety sounds like. This is not the same as perfection. People irritate each other. People fail. People need space. The art is staying findable. Dipper learns to knock before solving. Mabel learns to ask before fixing someone's loneliness with glitter. Stan learns to delegate. Ford learns to narrate. Suze learns to rest his helpfulness. Wendy learns. Actually, Wendy already knew that sometimes the kindest thing you can do is say, "Take a breath. I'll stand here while you do." If you ask the town to define family, you would get a list that includes blood relatives and then keeps going. Co-workers, neighbors, one-time customers who became regulars, who became uncles in practice, creatures that qualify because they bring you a button when your jacket is missing one. Family here is a verb. It means to keep in view. Nights are quieter now that certain dangers are back in their jars, but you can still hear the work of friendship if you're paying attention. Footsteps in pairs, laughter that returns for a second round 10 minutes later because someone remembered the really good part. Spoons clinking, pages turning in the same room. The thrum of a washing machine doing the chores that keep love from drowning in heroics. This is Gravity Falls real magic. A place where found bonds become standard issue, where the town offers you a role and leaves enough blank lines for you to write your version of it. You don't have to save the world here. You just have to carry one corner of the table when someone says lift. Not every question earns an answer. Some earn a home. Gravity Falls is full of such questions, arranged carefully on shelves. They are dusted. They are labeled. They are not forced. The Zodiac remains a wheel that points at people as much as it points at fate. Did it always mean exactly those 12? Or is a wheel a promise that roles can rotate? That symbols can exchange bearers as a town grows new heroes? The journals do not say. The journals say maybe written with a pen that respects how heavy outcomes can get when you write them down in ink. Journal 4, whispered in late-night debates, is a rumor with excellent manners. If it exists, it keeps company with lost socks and found courage, the category of artifacts that the town prefers to keep in circulation rather than in glass. If it doesn't, the longing for it solved a real problem. It kept people curious without making them reckless. That's a decent use for a myth. There are stones with grooves that never keep moss. No one knows why. There's a bend in the river where leaves float upstream every seventh Sunday, and the frogs clap as if they've been waiting for it. There's a ligature of roots under the west hill that hums at dusk and falls quiet if you hum back. None of these demand interference. They demand appreciation. People bring a thermos and a friend and let the secrets perform. The portal's aftertaste lingers in the machinery of town hours. Every so often, a day will feel slightly larger, as if it borrowed long sleeves. You notice if you plan too much. You don't if you plan just enough. Blendon would call this residual effect. The town calls it extra time to be kind. No one files a complaint. Out past the ridge, the forest keeps a trail that does not accept shoes. Those who know walk it barefoot, gently, and return with the quiet you get after a good cry. They do not describe what they saw, not because they swore an oath, but because language would take the wrong kind of credit for an experience that liked belonging to the body. Bill? The cipher's symbol shows up the way old graffiti does, faded, covered, still technically there. Some kids scare each other with it in October. Some grown-ups nod at it like you nod at an uninvited relative who finally learned to knock. Power without permission is quieter now. That is not the same as gone. The town knows the difference and keeps the ritual sharp. Ask twice, read twice. Choose the long way when the short way trembles. The biggest unsolved thing sits in kitchens and on porches. What will these children become? You can guess. You shouldn't. Predictions make lazy chairs. The town prefers benches. Sit, watch, help when asked, move when it's time. Dipper will mistake a few mazes for maps and then build better maps. Mabel will love the world so hard it will have to reroute a parade or two to accommodate. Soothe will outkind himself. Wendy will be exactly where she should be, which saves more afternoons than anyone can count. Stan and Ford will keep learning the art of being useful men without pretending they are only useful. The forest will clap in rings, the river will nod. Hey, there is a final shelf of mysteries labeled Keep for Wonder. This is where the town stores its right not to know. Who carved the earliest marks? Why does the fog behave like a librarian on Tuesday? Where do those radio songs come from that sound like they were recorded tomorrow? The label on the shelf is the answer. Keep for Wonder. We are allowed to keep it. Unsolved does not mean unsafe. It means there are rooms we use without owning, paths we walk through permission, not conquest. Gravity Falls excels at this. It shakes your hand and keeps your curiosity in view, then guides it to a window so you both can look out and agree that sometimes the best thing to do is sigh happily and pour more tea. Night returns to the valley the way a favorite blanket finds shoulders. The neon at the shack hums on its lower setting, polite as a whisper. The forest lowers its voice to match. Somewhere, the diner flips the last chair onto a table, its legs in the air like a contented kid. The river says its evening line, and then another, just for you. Inside the shack, rooms settle. The main floor exhales. Cabinets, having spent the day being extroverts, enjoy the quiet job of being shelves. In the attic, 2 beds remember the exact weight of children and welcome it, or the memory of it, without keeping score. A sweater lies folded in a way that proves it was admired even after it was put down. A notebook on the nightstand has its pencil tucked just so, ready to be useful and not jealous if it is ignored in favor of sleep. Stan checks locks with the efficient tenderness of a captain who believes in mourning. Ford clicks off a lamp and leaves the journals as he found them, lids closed, embers warm. Soothe sets a wrench in the right spot so tomorrow's hand can find it in the easy way. Wendy swings by the threshold, glances, nods, and lets the door know it did good work today. The house listens to each gesture. Houses like to be thanked in verbs. The town outside has its own bedtime chores. Dogs tell each other jokes down the block. Wind chimes, having been brave about randomness all day, settle into a key and sing one note long enough to bless a streetlight. The storekeeper counts the drawer not like a dragon, but like a gardener who knows which seeds are for planting and which are for eating. A porch light stays on, a kind of promise. Another goes out, a different kind. Look at the sky a last time. It is not showing off, it is offering exactly what you need. Enough stars to remind you what size you are. Enough dark to let your mind unclench. If you have questions left, and you do, they can wait where the good ones wait, in a warm pocket beside a name you trust. Gravity Falls is not finished. It never will be. That is not a threat. That is a blessing. Close the book. The spine approves. Set the lantern down. The flame dims to the size of a heartbeat. You have walked through symbols that smile and brothers that forgive, through portals that made the air sing, and through days when the world tried on a nightmare and decided gently to take it off. You carried your corner of the table, others carried theirs. Together is the spell. Sleep now. Let the shack keep watch. Let the forest stand guard with its slow, endless shush. Let the river time your breathing. In the morning, there will be coffee and chores and new jokes, and maybe one unsolved thing catching sunlight on a shelf that says, keep for wonder. For now, there is this, a valley that knows your weight and holds it. A town that remembers your name even when you are quiet. And a set of pages that will still be here when you open them again. Good night, Pines family. Good night, Gravity Falls. Good night, you.